grab another cup of coffee, another slice of cake, see if there were any figs left. It's time to get down to a little bit of extra study. Because you know what? We can never have too much study. This is a topic that I hope you'll find interesting. It's one that a lot of people are afraid to ask questions about, which is, when does it end? You know, the world. When do we wrap up existence? When does that all wind down? How will we know when it's coming? Now, in other faiths and other tradition groups, people will talk about the end of days constantly. They'll talk about the end of days more than they'll talk about tomorrow. Judaism doesn't do that much, but we do talk about it a little bit. And I want to go ahead and try and clarify a few of the points that Judaism makes about this topic. For some reason, it printed a little weird, so bear with me on how it's laid out on the page. I'm not quite sure what happened there. We're going to actually skip the top paragraphs because we got started a little late. It's just a little bit about how this topic has been in the news over the last decade as more and more people are like, we're in the end of days, it's the time, you know, apocalypse, countdown, these are the signs of the end. Just a little bit of that. But let's look at what Judaism actually says on the topic, beginning with how do we look for the end? So let's talk about counting. We've got a calendar. What year is it? 5783, which means we're coming up to 5784, this Rosh Hashanah. Well, if we're counting, then, you know, maybe a good old bit of math might work. Well, Rav Zira would find rabbis involved in figuring out when the Messiah would come. He would say to them, by your leave, I ask you not to put it off, for we have learned three things when not looked for: the Messiah, a lost object, and a scorpion. Typical Amora behavior. Remember, we talked about the Amoraim last week. He is an Amora in the Talmudic time period. He is saying, look, if you're trying to calculate when Mashiach will come, when the Messiah will come, you're actually preventing it from happening. Because the only way it'll happen is by surprise. That it's not going to happen with you figuring it out. Because after all, what three things show up when you least expect them? A scorpion, which you have to live in the Middle East and know what scorpions are like, where it says, there's a scorpion there. When you're trying to find them, you can't find it, and then you turn around and there's one right there. A lost object is a lot more familiar to all of us here. How many times have you spent hours trying to find something in your house? You can't find it, you give up, you turn around, and there it is. Right? It happens all the time, and that happened all throughout history, right? This is not a new problem. That's always been going around. And then, of course, he tags Mashiach into that familiar frame. Sev Rav Katina, the world exists for 6,000 years and will be destroyed for 1,000 years. As it is said, the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day, and for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday. All right, so Rav Katina is trying to say, look, we get this idea that there is how many days of creation? 6, right? And we know that a day in the eyes of God is how long, according to the psalm here? 1,000. There's 6 times 1,000. Even I can do that math. It's 6,000 years. Well, 6,000 years, and we're currently in the year 5783, means that in the year 2240 is what his prediction is. That will be the 6,000th year of creation, and that's when the end of times will begin. Everybody following the logic? Okay. Rav Hanan, son of Tahalapia, said to Rav Yosef, I came across a man who had in hand a scroll written in Assyrian block letters in the holy language. I said to him, where did you get this? He said to me, I was employed in the Roman armies, and I found it in the Roman archives. In the scroll, it is written that after 4,292 years from the creation of the world, which would be the year 532 CE, the world will be an orphan, meaning that's going to be the end. As to the years to follow, in some there will be wars of great dragons, and in some wars of Gog and Magog, and the rest will be the days of Mashiach. And the Holy One, blessed be He, will renew the world only after 7,000 years. Rav Acha, the son of Rabbah, said after 5,000 years. Okay, so what do we note from all these days?
Everybody's different.
They're all different. And did the world enter end game apocalypse in the year 532? No, it did not. I haven't seen any dragons around lately. Have you? Right? All of these calculations are wrong. All of these calculations have not come to pass. Well, the Mayan calendar also didn't work, right? Because actually the Mayan calendar, I explained that a little bit at the top, was also not about apocalypse. That was like getting to the end of the calendar that's hanging on your fridge and thinking that because the calendar is end, that means the world is going to end. No, it means you need to buy a new calendar. The Mayans made a calendar that they thought would last long enough, and it turned out that in the year 2012 we reached the end of their refrigerator calendar, and people began to panic because no one bothered to ask the Mayans what it meant. Because, you know, the Mayans are still around, that they still exist in Central America and Mexico, and if you just asked them, they would have told you not to panic. But no one ever bothered to ask an indigenous person anything, not when there's a buck to be made. All right, so Judaism is actually strongly opposed to the whole notion that you can somehow calculate the end for the end of days. That we are not supposed to calculate the end. In fact, there are other passages in the Talmud that say, those that calculate the end of the days, blasted be their bones. Like it is a sin in the eyes of some of the sages to even try to come up with a calculation. Think about that anytime you see a YouTuber who's saying, here's the Jewish Kabbalistic calculation for when the end of days is going to come. They are violating Talmudic principles. We're not supposed to work out the math. Okay, but what about signs, right? What about omens? What about features to the end of days? Can we interpret the events around us to be able to predict that we are or are not at the end of days? All right, next passage. The 7-year cycle in which the son of David will come. Right, this is referring to like the Shemitah cycle, right? The son of David is another phrase for Mashiach, for the Messiah. As to the first one, meaning for the first year of that cycle, the following verse of Scripture will be fulfilled. And I will cause it to rain upon one city and not upon another. In the second year, the arrows of famine, will be set forth. In the third, there will be a great famine in which men, women, and children will die, pious men and wonder workers alike, and the Torah will be forgotten by those that study it. In the fourth year, there will be plenty, which is no plenty. In the fifth year, there will be great prosperity, and people will eat, drink, and rejoice, and Torah will be restored to those that study it. In the sixth year, there will be rumors. In the seventh year, there will be wars. As to the end of the seventh year, the 8th year, the son of David will come. Mashiach will come. All right, so it's very, very simple. You get weird weather patterns, followed by famine, followed by people rejecting Torah and having other problems. There'll be war, there'll be plenty, it'll go back and forth. Very clear, right? All right, here's the Talmudic question. Said Rav Yosef, how many 7-year cycles have passed like that one, and yet he has not come? Like, wait a minute. Have you been paying attention? We get years like that all the time. There will be strange weather. Yeah, that was called yesterday. There will be great wars. Yeah, yesterday. There will be famine. Still yesterday, right? These are not exactly what you would call definitive signs that are unique to only one point in human history. These are things that are happening all the time. How can you say this is going to be the sign? Said Abaye, who tries to salvage this a little bit, were there rumors in the 6th year and wars in the 7th year? And furthermore, did they come in the right order? So Abaye tries to justify this idea by saying, yeah, maybe these things happen all the time, but they have to happen in just the right order, and we have to have rumors of the coming of Mashiach at just the right time. Again, traditionally, we don't keep a little diary of these events trying to tell whether this year is the year. We don't bother trying to track down if this is part of the 7-year cycle in which Mashiach will arrive.
I hope this isn't too off topic.
Go for it.
We're trying to talk about when is the end. What is the end?
No, it's not too off topic, but let's save that for the end. That's very appropriate. Let's save what the end will be after we figure out whether or not we can predict when the end will be. And then I'll do a very short summary of what the end might look like, because there is great debate over that as well. Okay, so there's another option. Maybe what we need to be worried about is not the calendar year. It's not the signs and omens of a given year. Maybe it is up to the deeds of the world. Maybe there are certain actions that will precipitate the end. So, said Rab, all of the deeds have passed, all of the ends have passed, and the matter depends only on repentance and good deeds. All right, so Rab is actually telling us, look, God already predicted the end, and he gave us multiple ends. The year is going to end here, the year is going to end, or the world's going to end here, the world's going to end here. They all came, they all passed, nothing happened. Now, it's up to us. What he is saying is that there were potential ends for creation, potential moments for Messiah to show up, and we missed them for one reason or another. Either God pushed them off or delayed them, or we were not worthy, or whatever explanation you want to give. But now it's just waiting until we are actually in a point for Mashiach to come. And there is no more counting. There will be no more signs. Just our behavior is everything that is the only thing that will determine when Mashiach arrives. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi found Elijah standing at the door of the burial vault of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. All right, so Elijah crops up a lot in rabbinic texts as a go-between. Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi, as we hear about him in our various songs. Eliyahu Hanavi, excuse me, it seems like the air conditioner is not on in here for some reason. Eliyahu Hanavi is considered the go-between between this world and heaven because he didn't die. Right? Eliyahu Hanavi very famously was taken in a fiery chariot without ever having been described as dead. So he kind of has a foot in both worlds. And that means rabbinically, he often shows up as a figure that can have a conversation with a rabbi in this world about an insight taken from the next world. Everybody seen how he works as that bridge figure? Okay. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is talking to him. And he said to him, am I going to come to the world to come? Rabbi Yoshua, or Joshua, I'll pick a language and stick with it, is asking Elijah, hey, when I die, do I have a place in the world to come? Do I have a place in heaven? And Elijah says, if this master wants. Meaning, yes, you can, but yes, you have to want it, you have to earn it. You are certainly eligible for the world to come. He said to him, question number 2, when is the Messiah coming? You know, might as well push my luck. And he said, go and ask him. Wait, go and ask him? And where is he sitting? At the gate of the city. All right, so Messiah is sitting at the gate of the city? He's just like chilling in the gate? And what are the marks that indicate who he is? How will I know the Messiah sitting at the gate? He is sitting among the poor who suffer illness, and all of them untie and tie their bandages all together, but he unties them and ties them one by one. All right, so this is a very pitiful scene, hopefully, which will elicit a little compassion for you. All of the poor, and probably talking here about people suffering from tzara'at or some other form of illness that's causing bodily deterioration, the sick people would undo all of their bandages and clean themselves, and then they would rewrap their body. The Messiah, on the other hand, would unwrap an arm, clean it, and rewrap the arm. Unwrap the other arm, clean it, rewrap the arm. He'd do one part of the body at a time. Everybody clear on the difference between the normal people who are sick and what the Messiah is doing? Notice also the Messiah is sick, right? He is suffering along with those that are in the worst condition in that community. And why is he doing this? He is thinking, perhaps I may be wanted, and I do not want to be held up. right? If I untie my entire body, then if someone rings the bell saying, Mashiach, it's time, I'm going to have to wait until I wrap everything back up again to go out and do my messianic duties. But if I only have one arm unwrapped, then I can quickly wrap one arm and get to work faster. Make sense? Right? It's like sleeping fully clothed during a hurricane, just in case. He wants to be ready in case he is needed at any moment. So he, this is Rabbi Joshua, went to him, saying to him, "Peace be unto you, my master and teacher." Very powerful honorific. He said to him, "Peace be unto you, son of Levi." All right, he knows who he is. This guy's Messiah. He said to him, "When is the master coming?" Meaning, when is the Messiah coming? Okay, I see you here. There you are. You're the Messiah. When are you actually going to step onto the world stage and usher in the Messianic era? And the Messiah gives him the answer, today. Well, what a great day to be asking. Today, great. He went back to Elijah, who said to him, what did he tell him? What did he tell you? He said to him, "Peace be unto you, son of Levi." He said to him, "He thereby promised you and your father the world to come, because you and your father, son of Levi," Levi is his father, "therefore, hey, you are guaranteed a place in the world to come." Very good. But he lied to me, for he said to me, "I'm coming today," but he did not come. So can I really trust that I have a place to come if this guy's lied to me by saying that I'm going to come today, and then he didn't come? He said to him, this is what he said to him. You misunderstood. Today, if you will obey his voice. So what it's trying to say in this passage is that the Messiah is waiting, like literally on high alert, ready to go at a moment's notice, and suffering in the meantime, until we are actually ready. And that if we're not ready, it's not going to happen. Everybody following the logic? All right. Of the three, counting dates, looking for signs, wondering about deeds, how do they make you feel about the hope, the aspiration, the potential of the Messiah's arrival? So it's our responsibility, it's our actions. Does that make you feel better or worse than if God had said it's going to happen in 2024 at 12 p.m. on a Thursday? All right, so it's in your hands. That makes you feel more in control, although I will point out it's not only your hands. It would be everybody's hands. And I know a lot of people don't trust everybody, even if they trust themselves.
I was going to say, it sounds like it makes it impossible to happen. Because what percentage of people have to want, every single person in the world have to want Messiah to come? What if I have plans to go to Disney tomorrow? Am I going to intentionally, I don't want you to come tomorrow, I have plans.
Right. Do you know what these tickets cost? How could you come and interrupt my vacation? And, there is a very real concern that if it's in our hands, then maybe it'll never happen, right? I trust God to bring redemption. I don't trust my neighbor, because if you met that guy, right, he's mean. I don't like him. So if I have to rely on his righteousness before my world gets saved, then I'm going to despair that my world will never be saved. And there's the other side. If I told you it's going to be 200 years from now, if there's going to be in the year 6000, and we're in right now 5783, well, what am I bothering with? Right? I mean, so either I can be lazy and do whatever I feel like, because, the Messiah's not coming tomorrow, and my efforts aren't going to bring him any faster. He'll arrive when he's going to arrive, and I'm just going to carry on doing whatever I'm normally going to do. I will have no hope, no anticipation, no eagerness, and no push to try a little harder because it's not going to change his arrival time at all. And so why bother? And then there's also the issue of despair. A lot of people feel that the daily hope, the daily aspiration that the Mashiach will come, that the world will be better tomorrow, gives them hope today to behave and strive today. But if I told you it's not going to happen, right? If I told you the next 200 years for climate change are going to be misery and suffering for the human species, that we are going to have storms the likes of which you've never seen, that billions of people are going to be displaced, there will be famine, hunger, and disease, and drought, and other types of rack and ruin, and we will not get that straightened out for another 200 years. And you, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren are all going to have to suffer through it. And nothing you can do about it. That's just the way it's going to work. We won't have the technology to fix it for 200 years. Would that make you happy to know that in 200 years it'll be right? Even if I guaranteed 200 years from now it'll be right, you know, proof of my time-traveling credentials and I can show it to you? Or would you be like, well, that sucks. 200 years? I thought we could do it, I thought maybe we could do it sooner, maybe not tomorrow, but, you know, I thought we could try, that there would be options, and we could, you know, keep working on changing our behavior and developing technology and cooperating with the world. Well, whatever, I guess it's just going to be bad for 200. It is very disheartening. And then the alternative, what if I told you the Messiah was going to come 6 days from now? And then day number 7 comes, and Messiah is still not here. Then you're like Rabbi Yoshua, it's a lie. Even if I can tell you, oh no, it was only because we weren't worthy, only because we didn't do this, only because we didn't do that, you're going to feel that if the date comes and pass, very disappointed, if not outright lied to and betrayed. So it is a no-win situation. If I tell you that the Messiah will come because we have earned it, you can despair because you think we as a community, as a country, as a global community cannot earn it because I don't believe in other people so wholeheartedly. If I tell you, on the other hand, the Messiah will come 200 years from now, or when those passages were first being written, 1,000 years from now, then you will also despair that it's going to be forever, and there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to imagine it happening. Why even try harder? It's just going to take, it'll come when it comes, but it's not going to affect my life. I might as well just be depressed. On the other hand, if I tell you it's going to come tomorrow, and then it doesn't happen because of very good, legitimate religious reasons, you're going to feel betrayed and wonder why you bothered as well. There is no good answer to this question of when will the end be that doesn't cause a problem for the human spirit and the human psychology and human behavior, which is why Judaism doesn't focus on it. Right? We don't dwell on this topic. You don't get rabbis giving sermons all the time about here's how to recognize the apocalypse. Here's how to know what the end of days are going, when they are going to be. Here is the date on your calendar for the coming of Messiah. Because we've had way too much experience. We are an old religion, and we know what happens when people try that. And we know what happens when people pretend to know. We know what happens with, most famously, Shabbatai Tzvi, the great false Messiah of the Middle Ages. We know that thousands and thousands of people can be led to their doom by false promises such as this. Which is why Judaism has the classic tale that if you're planting a tree and someone comes and tells you Messiah has arrived, you finish planting the tree and then you go to greet him. We don't give up on this world for the hope of Messiah. We do what we need to. And yes, we still go and check and see if it's real because we would like the Messiah to arrive. But we don't uproot our world off that hope because we know that that type of hope quickly turns to ash in the wrong set of circumstances.
Rabbi, what was the guy's name that had all those people kill themselves in some island?
Jim Jones. Yes, one of the worst cult disasters, but there have been lots of them. Heaven's Gate is another example of many people who believe in a cultish leader, Jewish or non-Jewish, that this is the end of times, this is when it's going to happen, they need to change what they're doing or take their own lives. And unfortunately, these types of things happen over and over again for small groups. And Judaism has tried to learn that that's not what we want our people to behave like. All right, a couple more texts, and then we'll wrap it up with Birkat Hamazon or future questions about what it actually might look like. Rabbi Eliezer said, If the Israelites repent, they will be redeemed, as it is said, return backsliding children, and I will heal your backsliding. You start returning, and God will meet you halfway. Rabbi Joshua said, and is it not written, you have sold yourself for naught, and you shall be redeemed without money? How can you say my deeds are going to fix me? When God said in Isaiah, which we read, if I remember correctly, last week, that God didn't get rid of us for something. We were sold for naught. It was just what was appropriate at that time, and therefore we will be redeemed for free, meaning we don't have to earn it. We don't need to pay for our redemption through our behavior. But you shall be redeemed without money, with neither repentance nor do good deeds. Rabbi Eliezer said back, but is it not written? On the other hand, return to me and I shall return to you. But Rabbi Joshua said, but is it not written, for I am master over you, and I will take you, one from a city and two from a family, and I will bring you to Zion. Again, it doesn't seem to be contingent or dependent. The argument continues. Rabbi Eliezer said, but it is written, in returning and rest you shall be saved. Rabbi Joshua said, but is it not written, thus says the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, and his Holy One, to whom man despises, to him whom the nations abhor, to a servant of rulers, kings shall see and arise, princes also worship. So you can see they each can bring a quote from Tanakh, from the Bible, proving you need to do good deeds, or proving God will redeem us even if we are lacking in good deeds. They each have sufficient text to back up these claims. Rabbi Eliezer said, but is it not written, if you will return, O Israel, says the Lord, return to me. Said to him Rabbi Joshua, but it is written elsewhere, and I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore to him who lives forever, that it shall be for a year, 2 years and a half year, and when he shall have accomplished scattering the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. From the incomprehensible book of Daniel. What Rabbi Joshua is trying to finish off here with saying is that the book of Daniel seems to imply that it's just going to be a timeline, that it'll happen when it happens. It's really hard to understand Daniel, so we're not quite sure how that timeline will unfold, but it'll happen when it happens. Seems to be what Daniel is saying, not it'll happen when you are ready or when you have earned it. This is incredibly frustrating for people that have grown up in a Christological cultural setting, because we are constantly bombarded by movies and stories and press releases about the end of the world. The apocalypse has an oversized influence on Western imagination, because the apocalypse was embedded into the early Christian church. It was an apocalyptic religion at its inception, and despite having eventually postponed the apocalypse for enough time that they now just say it'll happen someday, they have always been fascinated and fixated upon the end of the world. And if you grow up with that being the dominant culture surrounding you, it's very easy to think the end of days is the most important question we could possibly have. But that's not the most important question in Judaism. The most important question in Judaism is, what am I doing today? That's it. What am I doing today? How am I behaving? How am I acting? This time of Elul, when we are preparing for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we don't ask, will this be the last year of the world? Will Mashiach come this year? It'd be nice, sure. But like Natan was saying, in our own hands is what I will do this year. I may not be able to bring Mashiach. I may not be able to prevent Mashiach, whether I have tickets to Disneyland or not. But what I can do is make my year a better year than last year. That measure of redemption I can achieve. That measure of improvement for myself and the world I can achieve. And that will make the world a better place, and indeed make it more like the days of Mashiach. To come back to Zev's question, what will those days actually look like? Well, that's the beautiful thing in Judaism. We don't know. Because deliberately, the prophets use metaphor describing those days as being wonderful, beautiful, times of peace, times of joy, times of plenty. They often also remark that it will be a time of upheaval, of struggle to get to that point. But likewise, they also talk about it not being so difficult. And it seems to be, according to many different interpretations from different sages, that we have two paths ahead of us, that there will be the days of Messiah who comes and establishes the understanding of God in the eyes of the entire world, that everybody will be literally on the same page. Not all Jewish, but all connected to one God, right? His name will be one and God will be one, as we say at the end of Aleinu, and that the entire world will then be reconciled to one another because we will all be serving God, each in our own way, but still recognizing as the same God, and as such, not be so horrible to one another. That the Messiah will be able to teach a proper life, a proper morality that will be recognized and followed by the world universally. My favorite example of this is that the Messiah will be a perfect moral teacher. Not necessarily that he is perfect in any non-human way, but he will be perfect in the sense that he will be able to reach all billion of us as students to make us understand uniquely how we will live in this better way. It won't be with magic tricks. It won't be with, water to wine and fishes and loaves and things like that. It will be with moral education, with helping each person to live properly according to the ways that Judaism has outlined humanity should be living. Rabbi Joshua also very famously says the days of the Messiah will not be any different physically. Right? When we talk about the lion and lamb, says Rambam, which by the way is a misquote, but a very famous one in English, the lion lie down with the lamb, that's just because we like alliteration in English, it's not the actual Hebrew. What we're talking about there is not the magical camaraderie of wild animals. We are talking about the camaraderie of people. Those that are normally warlike and those that are normally not warlike will no longer be fighting or struggling one against the other, but will be able to live in harmony and peace without one preying upon the other. That's what the metaphor means, says Rambam. That's not magic. I know we may feel like it's magic because we have lived so long in a world where people do prey upon each other, but we only have to look at our own society to recognize that there is greater equality now than there has ever been in human history, that there is greater peace now, both on an international level as well as in an interpersonal level. The likelihood of you getting beat up now is far lower than if you lived 1,000 years ago, and lower still than if you lived 2,000 years ago. We are living in a representation that with a little bit of better instruction and a little bit of better societal effort, we can make this world be closer to what it will look like for the Messiah. So when the Messiah comes, if we've all done our job, he will just take us across that last meter of the finish line and establish the final elements and the permanency of that peace, that harmony, and that completeness. If we don't, well, then Messiah will drag us across the finish line, and that will come with much strife and turmoil as those who are still attached to the ways of war and violence and greed put up a fight before they are finally no longer active in the world. And that will then usher in a period where peace will reign. Then we get into the really complicated stuff, which is Mechaye Metim. We talk in the Gevurot, the second blessing of the Amidah, as well as many other parts of rabbinic texts, about a resurrection of the dead. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. We recognize it as being a fair and just compensation for all the generations that lived before the days of Mashiach. For after all, why should it be down to the random roll of a dice that these souls get to live in the world and that is now living according to the harmony that God had always wanted from the Garden of Eden onward, but every generation prior to that had to live in the worse world? Why should only those lucky few get to experience that? Instead, since Judaism actually does like this world and think that our bodily existence and the journey of the soul in this world is beneficial to the spirit, that the bodily existence will be given a second run for all of those who had lived prior to the days of Mashiach. Now, whether that means they will stand up out of the graves like a Raimi zombie movie, or whether that means they will be born from scratch up again, whether that means they'll materialize in like a Star Trek, and at what age, and will they still be married to the person they were married to at the end? What happens if they had one wife or two wives? All of that, we don't know. When it happens, I'll tell you, and then it'll be clearer. But we have to understand and appreciate that how it happens, what happens, will be beneficial for us and for our spirit, and to recognize that the truth that this material world is meant to be good, meant to be a place where the soul is able to frolic and grow in happiness and joy, not just merely tolerate it. That is an important Jewish concept that we can live with in this existence, regardless of what form the Chayei Metim will come. But all the metaphors about, paving stones of gems and, overflowing bounty for, heaven eventually will be the ultimate repository of our souls, and that is a non-physical existence. So nobody eats in heaven because no one's got a body, no one's got a mouth. But we do have an intermediate period of this re-existence in this physical world made perfect within the laws of nature.
The Muslims and the Hindus are very obsessed with the end times.
Most people are obsessed with the end times. We're kind of weird as a faith of not being obsessed with the end times, which is why whenever I do an interfaith program, and someone invariably asks, what did Jews believe about, and then the end of the world, heaven, hell, whatever, my answers are always very more meh compared to all the other people on the panel, of which I'm quite proud. Right? We have Jewish teachings, but we have a variety of teachings, and we use them to inform how we live now, not what we are hoping for at the end. Right? We believe this world is special, unique, and this journey of our soul through this physical body, no matter how fragile and breakable it is a blessing. That God wanted us to live physically in this world. He would like this world to be the best world for us to live physically in. And eventually what will happen next? Yes, Olam Haba, the world to come, will be even better for our soul, but we get there through here, and this should be a good place. That's the long and short of it. Did you have any other specific questions on that, or?
I'm grappling with this idea because having grown up kind of like in this very conservative and Zionist kind of upbringing, I've always felt this kind of tension and guilt between like, I have a really great life in America, and aren't we all supposed to move to Israel? And it seems like there's a very much that same kind of like, isn't the Olam Hazeh so great? Aren't we supposed to be striving towards Olam Haba? Like, not like, I'm not, like, my Disney example is like, my plans 5 years down the road
Yeah.
for my career, my family, all these things that seem like they're all going to get kind of thrown out when Olam Haba comes.
Only if your career is, I'm a thief, right? If your career is professional assassin, then yeah, you're going to have a hard time when Olam Haba comes, when Mashiach comes, because that will no longer be a good job to have. But, what's that?
We might not need therapists.
Well, why not? We'll still need doctors. So just to give you a basic example, we'll still get sick in the world of Mashiach. Right? Natural laws are not going to be suspended. God created the universe and the physical world of it for us to live in both here and now and during the days of Mashiach. There's not going to be a world version 2.0 that we all suddenly transfer into as an upgraded experience of now no longer anyone gets sick. Because being sick is part of being physical, and being physical and breakable is part of being able to change. And physical illnesses will still happen. Mental illnesses and therapy of a variety of forms will still need to be done in order to help people live their best life. It's just we'll know how to help them more reliably, more accurately, more quickly, and distribute those services universally so that no one should ever have to go without, and everyone would be able to have it. It's just like for the food in the world to come, right? We're not going to feed everyone by having food fall from heaven. We'll take the food that we're already capable of growing and make sure that no one goes hungry. Because in the world to come, with Mashiach's insight, no one would think that it was reasonable to let someone starve. Whereas nowadays, we're kind of sort of okay with that to a certain degree.
So the depictions, I mean, at least the few that I'm somewhat familiar with, they're more metaphorical then,
So battling the nations there in the metaphor are representing the avarice, the greed, the Yetzer Hara, which will give us the strength to resist against it. The Leviathan is a symbol of chaos, of disorder, of the upheaval of the powerful over the weak. And yes, all of that will be subdued and conquered. But we will not have a magical sea serpent that is making our sukkah as a literal experience in this world. And I think I'm in good company with Rambam and many of the rabbis of the Talmud and going on record saying that.
So how would the Messiah rule the world with people living in Mars and space?
Well, if we're living in other planets by the time Mashiach comes, I'm pretty sure we'll have a way to communicate with them. And as far as rulership goes, remember in Judaism, the concept of rulership means that the ruled accept the ruler. That's the definition. It's not that the ruler has enough power to impose their will on others. It's that the ruler makes their rule so obvious that everyone wants to be under that type of system.
Yeah.
Right? So the Messiah will not rule with an iron fist, crushing all opposition. The Messiah will inspire the world to go, okay, finally, this is what we're supposed to be doing. Of course, yes, please, be in charge, tell us what to do. Everyone will agree. And if they don't, then assuming they're not actually contaminated by the Yetzer Hara, just, because they're a professional assassin, they can't understand and abide by this idea of peace, then that means that person's probably not the Messiah. They might still be a good teacher, but if they cannot convince the world that this way is the right way, then they can be a good person, but they're not Messiah. And I don't think anybody actually believed that, and we also saw there was not anything like universal acceptance even within his own country. And Messiah, I think, will be a little bit more compelling. So in order to teach, the other person has to be open to accept the teaching. But in order to be a good teacher, you have to know what is necessary to help the other person open up. So the Messiah will be known because of what the Messiah will accomplish. And that is on the shoulders of Mashiach, which is why it's a very high bar. It's why we don't give that title out just to anybody who happens to be a nice teacher. Right? If somebody's a good teacher, a good organizer, they're talking about God a lot, they want people to live well, we don't call that person Mashiach. We can say that's a good teacher, that's somebody with a good, Jewish spirit, and they are helping to make Jews better Jews, and that's great. But we should not call them Mashiach until the rest of the world, including the Jewish world, begins to take an interest and begins to say, you know what, there's something here. He may not be from my community. He may not dress like me. His hat may be different than my hat, or maybe he isn't even wearing a hat at all. But what he is saying sounds true. And when I apply it to my life becomes better. And I consistently get those results. It's not like, well, I went to a sermon and the sermon was great, and I went home and I was really happy and good for a day, and then by the end of the week I'd forgotten it. When the Messiah talks, when the Messiah teaches, it will not be forgotten by any heart that hears it. And that will be the ultimate proof. Now, most of us, I believe, are more skeptical of that superpower than we are of somebody who can make water into wine. Right? The gross miracles seem easy compared to the human social miracles. And that's why it takes faith. Because to have faith in the Messiah means you have faith in other people. That the other person truly does have a neshama, a soul. That they truly have that spark from God inside of them, that when it encounters the clear spark of Messiah, it will respond. And it will not avoid, it cannot avoid responding. To have faith in Mashiach is to have faith in humanity. And for many of us, especially right now, we often have trouble with that. because we are flooded too much with news that makes us doubt the humanity of humans. But I have to remind you again, just like I said earlier in the Devar, most people are nice. Most people are good. We don't always see the best version of them in traffic or in the supermarket or at the office or in the neighborhood. But most people, for most of their behavior, most of the time, is good. If not, we would all be still living as barbarians that were murdering each other to steal a cow. And we don't. And we have to recognize that those good people are confused, and so are we, about what to do and what to do today and what to do tomorrow and how to live in each moment. And Mashiach will come to help us get through that confusion. And just as we long for it, they will also respond to that call. It's hard, because, like I said, to have faith in the Messiah means to have faith in each other. And for some people, it's easier to have faith in God than it is to have faith in people. But it's precisely the faith in people that will allow the miracle of Mashiach to truly happen. And that's something we can practice in the short term. That's something that we can try to make our own life richer with, even if, God forbid, Mashiach doesn't come for another 2,000 years. Still would like it to be early, regardless of my plans. That's why we always say, Bimheira v'yameinu. May it be quickly in our day.